weather volatility has been with us for a long time. And people that talk about extreme weather events and linking it to doing something about these extreme weather events, and they immediately dive into the topic of reducing carbon emissions and dealing with climate change. So there's an obvious question that arises, and the minister made the point, and it's just a fact, it's not an opinion, that Canada is 2% of carbon emissions in the world. And so if Canada, for example, were to completely eliminate carbon emissions, or let's say cut them in half, so we are now 1% of the world's carbon emissions, would we change the weather? I want to zero in on the issue of whether if Canada reduces CO2 emissions by a significant amount, will we ameliorate extreme weather events?
I think I started my answer by saying, no, we're 2% of the total global emissions. So I think your example was if we went down to 1%. I guess that would have an impact, but it's not going to change the course of events.
So crippling the Canadian economy with a carbon tax or putting a price on carbon and so on, I can very well see possibly in the world that the opposition parties inhabit, they'll believe that carbon emissions will go down, and that may be the case. But what you're basically saying, if we reduce carbon emissions in Canada, it's basically going to have no effect.
Yeah, can I just nuance that a little bit? But yes, you're right. The actions in Canada alone are going to have a modest impact. We're 2%. The actions of Canada in conjunction with other countries and in the global forum can have a big effect. If you get China and the U.S. doing things, then you can actually accomplish something.
But again, I want to go back to the central point, the zero in on it, because our government is being criticized all the time on the climate change issue, and you're basically saying if we did everything that the opposition demanded us to do, demanded of the Canadian economy in terms of significantly reducing our standard of living while at the same time reducing carbon emissions, in terms of Canada itself and what we're doing in Canada here, it will have little or no effect on, for example, extreme weather events or indeed climate change in Canada.
I guess, all I can do is repeat the facts that you have said, which is we are 2% of global emissions, roughly. And so that's how much of the problem we're contributing to. And so if you have an impact on, if you reduce that, it's going to have a relatively modest impact overall. So, I just would let the facts speak for themselves.
But again,
I'm not going to comment on what policy is right or wrong, but the facts are just as you've described.
I'm not talking policy, I'm talking atmosphere chemistry here. So it's not policy.
So you're